Okay, I'd just like to make a few words about this Hanoi Summit that has just happened between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, or rather, a partial summit. The latest is actually that it's been suspended or come to an abrupt end. Um, in fact, it didn't even get to the point of the formal dinner. I feel sorry for the waiters. No doubt they'd been hoping to see two world leaders, or rather, two world leaders. Um, this summit hasn't quite had the same level of attention as the Singapore summit last year, I guess, because that was historic. It was the first time an American president had met a North Korean leader, and so that's already been done. Nevertheless, there was still quite considerable focus on this. I think it's been put into second place by the tensions in India and Pakistan, but it was still going to be a big story. And very prestigious for the hosts in Vietnam. Um, Let me just say what I thought about this before this news that it's come to an abrupt end, which I'm not overly surprised by. But my take was, well, okay, does Trump deserve some credit for diplomacy, for reaching out? I suppose you could say he does, particularly when there was such rhetoric between the two men beforehand. So suppose you have to give Trump and Pompeo some credit for this, for reaching out. Talking is obviously better than war, and any any stall, any decrease in nuclear tensions is a good thing. And it is true that there hasn't been any tests since the Singapore summit. However, it's also true that it's very dubious to what extent North Korea has actually complied with the demands that the Trump administration was making. Um, my gut feeling is Kim Jong Un simply cannot be trusted. I mean, this is not a normal leader. This guy is incredibly unstable. I suppose some would say Trump is as well. But one problem I have with the whole thing is that Trump seems very willing to pander. I mean, I think it's dangerous to call Kim Jong Un a great leader. Why? Because all that does is reinforce the personality cult at home and make it harder for dissidents to speak out. I understand that Trump has to be diplomatic. I never thought I'd use those words in the same sentence, but he has to, he has to be respectful. He has to be polite. Um, but I don't think. I mean, let's look at other historic examples of summits. When Richard Nixon met Chairman Mao, he was polite, respectful, but I don't think Nixon went out of his way to grovel to Mao or to praise Mao. Rather, Ronald Reagan never done that with his Soviet counterparts. He was respectful. He was polite, but I think there is a difference here. I find it troubling that Trump is so quick to denigrate Western allies in Canada and Britain and elsewhere, and yet is also so quick to praise foreign dictators, whether it be Putin or Xi, or in this case, Kim Jong un. I understand that in geopolitics, you can't just come out with bombastic language. And Trump has certainly changed his tune in terms of how he refers to Chairman Kim. But I think any sort of praise towards Kim only reiterates that horrible, grotesque personality cult. Also, the nuclear issue is a very important issue, but if this is the one opportunity or second opportunity for any dialogue to take place, human rights cannot be off the table. And I don't know if the Trump administration has brought that issue up. Bear in mind, this is a president who once said he was okay with the use of torture. So I don't see Trump as a great champion in the fight against human rights abuses, not at all. And that's deeply troubling because this is supposed to be the leader of the free world. So if an American president can't vocally speak out about human rights, if he can't bring himself to do that, it's moral cowardice, but it's also, it's very unfortunate because it's letting down people who are fighting against this grotesque regime. So if it buys time, that's a good thing. But the fact this has come to an abrupt end certainly changes the landscape. And it's really a pity. Although I'm not overly surprised. If Kim suddenly starts resuming nuclear tests and so on, then I think it will just prove that he couldn't be trusted all along, and he was simply trying to buy time and simply taking Trump for a ride. Hopefully, hopefully that won't be the case. If there's no resumption of nuclear tests, then I'll give Trump credit, because it isn't an easy thing to do what he's doing, and for that alone, I'll give him credit because it's not easy in itself. However, he does not have to praise Kim in the way that he's doing. Um, Now, I just want to speak briefly about the host, Vietnam. That's one good thing that has come out of all of this. 50 years ago, if we go back to 1968, 69, needless to say, the United States and North Vietnam were engaged in a brutal, bloody war. Atrocities on both sides. Both sides. North Vietnam wasn't as innocent as some like to make out. But the point is, the United States and Vietnam now have pretty good relations, even though one's a communist country and one's obviously not. So that's a good thing in itself, and I understand there's been some big trade deals with Vietnam. So this summit hasn't been a total waste in terms of, if nothing else, it's helped with some trade deals with Vietnam, which presumably is good for American jobs. I don't know. Economics isn't my field, but I'd imagine that that is a good thing. And it also shows that there can be optimism that two bitter enemies can become strong partners. It's the same story with Japan. So that certainly is an optimistic thing. I think it was Bill Clinton who was the first American president to visit Vietnam since the Vietnam War, or the American War as it's known there. So, if nothing else, that's a good thing. Although I think there's a number of reasons why Vietnam American relations are so good. Number one, the Vietnamese won. North Vietnam won that war. So they don't really feel any grievance towards America today because they were the victors anyway. Number two, I think there is very real tensions between China and its neighbors. So maybe Hanoi is looking to the United States as a sort of bulwark against Chinese influence. Who knows? So there's a lot of interesting talking points that can come from this. But there was no joint speech, there was no major photo shoots in the same way. So I don't think this will go down as importantly as the Singapore summit last year. Nevertheless, if if we see a situation where there is no nuclear escalation, there's no more nuclear tests, then Trump deserves credit, and I'll give him credit for that. But only time will tell, and it remains to be seen.